Welcome back to the latest edition of Until Saturday. I'm Ari Wasserman, joined by David Ubben, my long-lost friend, who we have lost contact during the week because I went to the zoo. I had a nice weekend with my family. God knows what Dave was getting into, probably trying some new cuisine. But it does feel strange that this Saturday I was at the zoo and not watching football. Dave, how did you cope this weekend?
I was supporting the troops, Ari, because I
Yeah.
have respect for our nation's military. Army Navy was a classic. It always, like, no matter what, the finish seems to always deliver. I like that kind of football. It's just a different flavor, and I enjoyed it. And a lot of rest and relaxation. The first Saturday where I wasn't like slammed since like August. So it's always a little bit weird that first Saturday. You know, this is my 16th season covering college football. You never really know what to do with yourself that first week. So it was interesting. I like the Heisman. I care about the Heisman. I don't particularly care for the Heisman show, so I don't usually tune into that. But it was interesting.
Yeah. I always just feel like the Saturday after championship weekend just comes so abruptly. It's like hectic, and then nothing. So we are getting geared up for bowl season. We're going to have some preview stuff on the show, coming up in this coming week. But first, let me formally welcome everybody to the first off-season edition of Sunday Sound Off. In the show, we're going to have some Heisman reaction. We're going to reveal our votes. The 2024 Heisman finalist predictions, which gives us a key into next year because it is always next year. And then we're going to be getting to some voicemails, some written submissions, all that fun stuff. Be sure to follow the podcast on Apple, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Drop us a 5-star review and leave a question with your review, and we'll try our best to answer it on the show. And of course, if you're not here watching it on YouTube live right now, subscribe to the Until Saturday YouTube channel where you can watch us live. We're going to come up with the actual schedule of what it's going to look like moving forward, but we're live quite a bit. Both of the links to both the podcast and the YouTube channel can be found in the show's description. And now is a really good time to get subscribed to The Athletic if you're not already. 1-year gift subscriptions are going for $19.99 and 2 years for $39.99 by visiting theathletic.com/gift sale.
All right, we got to give a big shout out, by the way.
Okay.
On the
you
subject
cut off the promo of the newsletter, though.
Well, I'm sorry. I have to.
Okay.
Jesse Temple's story on I forgot the kid's name that transferred from Syracuse to Wisconsin and then reneged on his commitment, then went back in like 48 hours. Some of the best stuff on our website. It was fantastic. Great reporting.
Yes, his name's Leon Lowry.
Yes, fantastic. Apologies, Ari. Continue on with
Yes, but you're right. I think that, when it comes to the reporting and all the people that we have chipping in, we've got columns, we've got reports, we've got news, we've got everything you need from college football. But the best part of the Athletic is if you're a college football fan, you're probably a fan of an NBA team or an NFL team or some other team. And, we have full coverage of all the other sports too. So it's very inexpensive for the one-stop shop that you would have in terms of all of your football and basketball and hockey coverage, whatever you like. Also be sure to sign up for the Until Saturday newsletter, where you'll get your daily fill of college football news right into your inbox. The link to that can also be found in both shows' descriptions, and you don't have to be signed up for The Athletic in order to receive that, but I hope it will take 1 or 2 newsletters for you to realize that there's too much to miss by not joining The Athletic. Okay, so first let's start off with the Heisman Trophy. I've had a rough day on Twitter. I don't know if you saw this. People did not like, LSU fans did not like my ballot, but Jayden Daniels won the Heisman. He was a heavy favorite going in. He had 503 first-place votes, which was 211 more than the runner-up. It was a kind of a close race, or closer than I think most people anticipated, with Michael Penix coming in
definitely
with, I think,
from 1 to 2,
300 or 400 votes behind him. But we're going to reveal our ballots. You can tell me if you think I'm nuts. I'll tell you if I think you're nuts. But there were a lot of really good finalists in here. But first, we got to, pay homage to the person who won it, and that is Jayden Daniels, who is the third LSU player to win the award. Joe Burrow won it in 2019, and Billy Cannon won it in 1959. And I think that LSU, for so many years, was known as a team that was really, really good and struggled with quarterback play. Like, even their best teams at times, they didn't have very many great quarterbacks. And the next thing you know, the transfer portal era begins, and they bring in 2 transfers, Joe Burrow from Ohio State and, of course, Jayden Daniels from Arizona State, and both of those won the award in a 4-year period. thus maybe changing the paradigm of how we view LSU football moving forward. Jayden Daniels season stats, 72.2% completion, which was 7th in the nation, 3,812 passing yards, number 3 in the nation, 1,134 rushing yards, number 22 in the nation, and number 1 as a quarterback, 50 total touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Statistically, it was one of the best years for a quarterback ever. And here is a graphic that a lot of people were sending me in my mentions this week, but I thought it told a good story. Amongst Heisman winners, he's first in yards per game, first in total yards per pass, first in passer rating, first in QBR, first in total yards per attempt, adjusted yards per attempt, first rush yards attempts, first, tied for first in interceptions thrown, 4th highest in completion percentage. He had a very dominant statistical season, and obviously had flashes of greatness throughout the way.
I think it's worth noting. I was texting with some LSU people this weekend while this was kind of going on, and it was satisfying for me to see Jayden grow, because the biggest knock on him at Arizona State was, he kind of burst onto the scene. He's a really fun player, and he didn't really get better. He kind of regressed a little bit under Herm Edwards, despite playing with a bunch of really good players around him. If you go look at those Arizona State teams in 2021, 2022, they were loaded. Or just 2020 and 2021, excuse me. And if you look at the Jayden Daniels that we saw on Labor Day of 2022 in that Florida State game, and you look at the Jayden Daniels that closed the season, it's cool to see guys grow like that, man. Like, it's really satisfying, just as me, college football appreciator, enjoyer, watcher, to see a kid come to LSU, come to anywhere really, and grow up and become a really, really great player and improve the way that he did from the start of his first game at LSU to what is, he didn't have any eligibility left, I presume. I think that decision is probably made.
Jayden?
To close, yeah.
I think that he was a top 10 pick
back
projected in Dane Brugler's latest mock draft.
Okay, so eligibility or not, he's not coming back. But anyway, it's just cool to see, because I remember that guy that we saw in that first Florida State game, a year and a half ago, was unsure. It was one read and tuck it and run. Just not really sure of himself. We saw him progress toward the end of the season and got a lot better. And for him to make the leap this year has been cool to watch. And also, Ari, I have to say, I mentioned this in the show earlier, but for my LSU will win the national championship take, for Jayden to win the Heisman and LSU to not even sniff the playoff is, I don't know, frustrating to say the least, which is a good segue into your ballot, Ari, which we can discuss.
Well, I think it's important that you mention that you voted for him number 1. So Dave's ballot,
I had the most milquetoast ballot of all time this year. I can get a little spicy from time to time. It just depends. I think I see the game differently than some. I watch things closely. I had Bijan on my ballot last year, and that wasn't that popular. But this year, it was the most boring ballot of all time. I had Jayden 1, Penix 2, and Nix 3. I thought the gap between those 3 guys was very, very narrow, but for me, there were pretty clear lines of demarcation. I did probably some of the least consternation over my ballot as I've done in quite some time. It just seemed very clear to me that those were 1, 2, and 3 on my ballot, and that's how I voted.
Well, it's funny because I usually vote very easily. I usually have with milk toast. Is that the word you used? I always thought that was milk toast, like MILK space.
No, there's a Q, U, and an E in there.
Yeah, there's a Q, U, and E in there. That's how I know it's too highbrow for me.
Conjure up the image of toast soaked in milk, essentially the blandest thing you can come up with, but not spelled with a K. Yes,
I went really spicy this year. I think. I thought that
because you view the trophy differently. You can run through that.
And I don't know, and like I got somebody retweeted it into the LSU verse.
Yeah,
so I had a lot of LSU fans in my mentions the last 2 days, and I understand you're an LSU fan and it's your favorite team and your quarterback won the award. Jayden Daniels just did not appear on my ballot at all, which maybe. Looking back at it, I don't know if I regret it a little bit. Maybe you just get hit over the head with the same thing by so many people that you start to question yourself. But I thought this year was a very difficult year because the teams that made the playoff, JJ McCarthy, I don't think was close enough to being spectacular in any way to be the winner there. I know somebody voted him first.
Yeah, Michigan fans got mad at me because I tweeted, somebody needs to explain how you end up with JJ McCarthy number 1 on your ballot, and people were acting like I had slandered this kid. It's like JJ McCarthy's a good player, but if you watch the entirety of the season and come away with the belief that JJ McCarthy is the most outstanding player in college football, I think
that it just based on how you view the trophy. Now, people are like, you don't even know how to vote because you don't know the guidelines or understand the trophy yourself. And I think that's an interesting discussion in and of itself, because it is purposefully vague. The most outstanding player in the country can mean anything. You can make it mean however you want it to be. And so without further ado, I'll just say I voted for Michael Penix, number 1. Jordan Travis was my number 2 pick, which was, I think, a bizarre pick. And then it got really bizarre at the end with Jalen Milroe as my 3rd player. And people were insane about it. And maybe rightfully so. If you think, who is the best player in college football this year, maybe Milroe doesn't come up on your mentions a little bit. And I'm just curious, before we continue on this road, do you think that's insane?
It's not insane. I know how you view the award. I obviously disagree, but we view the voting differently. And so through the lens with which you are viewing the award, and you've talked about this a few times of the story of the season, it makes sense in that Daniels sort of thrived in obscurity this year. After that Ole Miss game, people just weren't really paying attention to LSU, and he was racking up some crazy numbers and, didn't really put that serious.
Did we even talk about the 600-yard game on our show that day?
Which game was it? The Ole Miss game?
The Florida game.
Oh, probably not. No.
The game that won him the trophy, I don't even think was discussed on our show. And maybe that's because of us, and we should have, because of the pure amount of yardage that the man put up. I think it was an NCAA record. But his games were so irrelevant all year that it's hard for me to get wrapped up in the statistics. And maybe that's just my fault. And maybe you just pick the best player based on how well they threw the ball and ran the ball and go with that. But coming into the year, we thought, especially you, that LSU had a chance of winning a national championship this year. I understand their defense was ass, and that's not his fault. But you're talking about the quarterback of a team that greatly failed when it came to their expectations as a program and outside expectations. Fair. And the program, for right or wrong, is led by that quarterback. And the thing that I really couldn't get past, and you tell me if this is just too many mental Olympics, but and I want you to answer this honestly, if Oregon would have gone out and taken care of business and beaten Washington, avenged their loss, and made the college football playoff, would Bo Nix have been your vote?
Yes, that was my plan, basically.
I think that was everyone's plan. Bo Nix was it was my plan. When I was in Vegas, I was like, if Bo Nix is playing for the Heisman, or my Heisman vote.
So he was a reason why they lost that game. If he had like balled out and just 450 yards and 5 touchdowns, and just like the defense can't get a stop, Penix probably slides above him. Maybe he goes to number 2, but he didn't play that well.
I mean, I don't know that I believe that he is the only reason they lost that game.
I'm not saying the only reason, but he is a reason why they lost the game. He played very poorly in the first half. Then they get the lead, they get the ball back, and he throws another pick. You affected your team's season in a hugely negative way. Well, I mean, Penix, who I voted for number 1, also threw a crucial pick in that game that could have lost it. Sure. I mean, it's they traded picks there. I think it was at the end of the third quarter. I think it was but he also made
separated it
a bunch of huge plays down the stretch. That 4th down play to score and to give them a trip to the playoff. And there's something to be said for putting up those kind of numbers and staying undefeated.
But before we get too off track on debating that, I think they're both fair points. But my thought process was, if Penix was the overall leader in the odds to win the Heisman heading into the Vegas trip, and then he lost, and that punished him.
Bo Nix, not Penix.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Bo Nix. Sorry, Bo Nix was the favorite to win the Heisman going into the Pac-12 championship game. His team lost, and he no longer was considered a favorite to win it. We are punishing a quarterback who was, by and large, excellent all year, put up great numbers. I think his completion percentage was right up there with Jayden's. for losing. We're punishing that person for losing. And then as a result of that, the person who gained from that was on a 3-loss team that was out of the playoff picture in week 5. And it's just like, how do you punish the person who was going to win and then reward that person that lost even more than that other one did because he had a great statistical season in the shadows with nobody watching it? Like, I'm not saying that Jayden Daniels isn't special. I'm not saying he shouldn't be drafted high. I'm not saying he didn't have a great season. I'm not saying that Sloan, the quarterback coach, didn't do a great job developing him. I'm not saying any of that stuff. But as it comes to the way that I view the award, which is the most prestigious award in college football given to the most outstanding player who helped tell the story of the season, you do not have to mention his name at all when discussing the most important things in this season. So
well,
that
you do
for me,
now.
I had a really hard time. Well, now you do.
Yeah.
But going into the award, if you weren't statistics obsessed, which obviously we're not, which is why we're voting.
Here's the thing, Art. There's a difference between being statistics obsessed and matching Bo Nix and Michael Penix's production through the air, and then adding a 1,200-yard rushing season on top of it.
Well, Rodrigo here, and you can put his thing up here on the screen, said they punished Nix for not stepping up when it mattered. QBs need to convert fourth downs when it matters. He failed time and time again. Are we forgetting that when LSU tapped out on national television with the entire country watching, Jayden Daniels didn't have a single touchdown until the game was decided and they had a grab-ass 75-yard score at the end? Mm-hmm. In the biggest moment of LSU's season, which obviously was week 1 against a team that went undefeated, they completely shit the bed. The entire team. I'm not saying it was just him. And obviously their defensive line got going, Florida State's that is. But the guy did not lead a scoring drive until the game was decided. Mm-hmm. So if you want to go through game by game and punish people for certain situations, you also have to acknowledge that those things happen with Jayden too. So there are other players, Catherine, one of our loyal listeners, is an LSU fan, and she was hitting me up on Slack about this. She was like, well, you wouldn't have voted for Lamar Jackson either. And I was like, Lamar Jackson was literally the only reason why Louisville was even in the national championship discussion, and it was Louisville. Yeah. Like, when you do things spectacularly at programs that aren't built the way that LSU is and the way that Georgia and Clemson and Ohio State and Alabama are, you get more credit for doing what you're doing there. So I think Penix leading his team to the playoff and doing it in a way where even when he played poorly, he made crucial play after crucial play after crucial play with the game on the line. Their coach called the games like a psychopath because they knew Penix would get it done. So when it comes to me, it's like we have an undefeated team who made the playoff. We have a transfer who's been up and down during his career, who throws the most beautiful pass in the country. His team is undefeated as a result of his spectacular play. And when it comes to stepping up in big moments, he did it time and time again. What big moments did Jayden even have this year? And it's not 100% his fault, but I didn't watch LSU play that much. I watched the highlights. I watched the YouTube cuts games so that we could talk about them rationally on the show. But there was never a reason for me to turn on my television and be like, LSU is playing right now. We got to be on this. Mm-hmm. And this is the person who wins the best, most outstanding player award, who played for a team that was supposed to win the national title and got their ass kicked for the first half of the season. It's just not, it didn't feel right to me. So that brings me down to the next question. And you don't have to agree with this. Listen, everyone's like, your vote should be revoked. You're an idiot. You don't know what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. I actually feel like I put a lot of thought into it. And I really thought maybe he would be my third. But when you think about the spectacular stories and the performances that led to game-changing scenarios in the season, there were more names that I thought deserved to be credited. Which brings us to Jordan Travis, my number 2. I don't think I was ever considering voting Jordan Travis for the Heisman, not until the playoff stuff. And I don't know if this is an abuse of the award in your mind, but if the College Football Playoff Committee is going to look into the camera deadpanned after they left the first undefeated team out of a Power 5 conference out of the College Football Playoff and look at me and say, hey, Florida State is not good enough to be a part of this. Florida State is a different team fundamentally without their quarterback, and we do not believe in a boardroom that they deserve to compete for the national championship. And that quarterback who brought everything together and made Florida State successful on the field for the first time in how many years, isn't that the quite literal definition of outstanding?
I mean, I think that's more a protest vote against the committee, Ari. I think it makes sense where you're getting there. I think it's hard for me to square going Milroe over Daniels personally. Travis.
Okay, so you're good with Jordan Travis, right?
I mean, I disagree, but I get where you're coming from. I think it's defensible, especially in the way that you frame it. I would not do it. Obviously, I didn't do it. I think Penix over Daniels is defensible. I disagree, but you can make the case, and a lot of people voted Penix number one for a lot of the reasons that you said. Yeah, a lot of people did.
So Milroe was my last one, and this is the one that people got mad about. And if you're mad, I understand. We're talking about Alabama football being on the doorstep of demise at the beginning of the year, and him turning into an absolute rock star who was rocking shit for the rest of the entire season after the beginning year debacle, and took a team that we all thought was left for dead. And they're not an underdog. They're immensely talented and have a nasty defense, but didn't just turn out to be pretty good, turned out to be a star. And he saved their season in most spectacular fashion in their rivalry game. And I don't know what it's going to look like next year, but I thought that his season and what he did, the stats don't measure up to Jayden Daniels, but I thought what he did for his team was far more remarkable than putting up 800 yards against Georgia State and having a great game against Florida's defense, who tapped out every now and then during the regular season. I respect what Jayden Daniels did. I just don't see the calculus of give this guy the award because he had a lot of big yardage games. Like, it just, like, the rest of the story for me isn't there. But you know what? It's America. There's a million voters for a reason. Everybody else has their own iterations of how they want to vote and how they view it. I just did not think that Jayden Daniels' season, spectacular as it was, measured up to how I view the award. The award is supposed to be the embodiment of excellence in a way of encapsulating that year, and Jayden Daniels is not a part of that discussion.
He is for me.
Well,
I think he was the most outstanding,
and that's why you voted for him. And a lot of people voted for him. Obviously, I'm the weird one, but like, I had like text messages exchanges with like 10 national reporters in the week leading into voting. And nobody wanted to vote for him. Everybody just did. And I think that's the issue. There's a lot of people who felt the same way that I do and just kind of relented. And
it's like, that's a team that was in the playoff hunt or a player in the playoff hunt grab the season by the scruff and say, this is mine. We didn't see that. And that's a big part of it. We didn't have that last year either.
I think I would disagree with that. The person I voted for did.
He didn't set the world on fire against Oregon. He played well. You
don't have to throw for 700 yards in a game to set the world on fire. That's like my fundamental disagreement of like the whole thing. You have to be efficient and accountable and somebody you can count on in crucial moments to go win a football game. That's how I view it. Okay, so we're going to get into some calls here. If I upset you, I'm very sorry. The good news is that voting for this award is also like voting for the president. So, there's more than enough sample size to get the person who should win who won. He wasn't on my ballot, and he won the award. Congratulations to Jayden Daniels on an excellent season, and congratulations to LSU for having their second Heisman Trophy winner in a 4-year period. Let's do a quick fun exercise to kind of preview next season before we get to the offseason, which is, who are your Heisman Trophy finalists for 2024, if you're doing it right now?
If I'm picking right now, I'm going to go Carson Beck, Dylan Gabriel, Quinn Ewers, and Jalen Milroe.
We have a straw poll for next year. You have to, if you haven't done this exercise yet.
I sent it to Manny today, yes.
Okay, did you send 3 or 4? I only sent 3.
I sent 3 because, the ballot is 3, but depending on how the voting goes, they bring up to like 5.
Okay. My 3 were Jalen Milroe, Travis Hunter, because I forgot about Travis Hunter. Like, if Colorado actually gets good, which we're going to get to on the show, Travis Hunter, I think, is one of the most dynamic athletes in the sport.
Got to stay healthy.
And he does have to stay healthy, but I thought that was the whole thing with him. He's an alien that doesn't get hurt. He got hurt this year, but he doesn't get tired, is what I meant.
Yeah.
I also have Dylan Gabriel, which I think is just an Oregon quarterback who makes a lot of plays. It's just a pretty easy thing to fit. And last but not least, Quinn Ewers for Texas. And who knows, man, if he wouldn't have gotten injured or, played a full season, he might have been in New York this year. So
sleeper DJU.
Here are some names that we didn't mention that I think we should at least put into the atmosphere as people are trying to remember who's coming back next year. Carson Beck, you said, Jalen Milroe, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, Dylan Gabriel, Connor Wegman at A&M, Cam Rising.
Not at A&M. I believe he's in the portal.
He's in the portal. Cam Rising, Cam Ward,
also
Cade Klubnik, Emeka Egbuka, Quinn Ewers, Will Howard in the portal, Noah Fafita at Arizona, Luther Burden at Mizzou, and Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State. So we'll see what teams these guys play for next year. But it is a time and change is happening right now. But a lot of really talented players that either figured into the season or were supposed to figure into the season and got hurt or, other circumstances occurred are going to be back next year. And we can't wait to spend all offseason talking about it. So other award winners this year, and then we'll get into the calls. Michael Penix Jr. won the Maxwell Award for the best player, which I think is redundant and hilarious. Marvin Harrison Jr. Won the Biletnikoff, first Ohio State receiver to win it in 28 years. How'd you vote for that? Do you vote for that?
No comment. Yeah.
What do you mean no comment?
I didn't get my ballot in this year. I just busy in the end of the season.
You forgot this.
It's not a forget. It's just like I got a bajillion things to do. I kind of feel bad about it, but just like
he won by one vote, so you should feel bad about it.
I'm pretty good about.
Would you have voted for Marvin?
Yeah, I probably would have voted for Marvin.
Okay,
honestly,
so
I usually am pretty good about voting for a lot of stuff. I'm on the, I got a bunch of votes, but just like the Heisman's the only thing that I like really care about. The other stuff is nice, but just I was slammed with stuff, and
I voted for Harrison, Odunze, 1, 2, and those I believe were the top two. I don't think they announced who the second one is, but also too, I think Connor Wegman is not in the portal. I don't know where you saw that.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was one of those.
Yeah, when you said it, I kind of was like, "What?" And our producer went and looked it up, and he said that doesn't seem to be the case. It could happen. It's just not the case yet. Ollie Gordon won the Doak Walker. Tavondre Sweat won the Outland Award. Go Horns. Peyton Wilson, the Bednarik Award, 138 tackles, 6 sacks, and 3 interceptions. Troy Taylor, shout out to the Ray Guy.
Troy Taylor, Ari, get the punting right.
Oh, sorry. You know what? We did a draft of the top 100 players in the country, and we reversed the order if there was like a college football draft, and did worst teams to best teams and picking the top 100 players in recruiting. And Mitch had Iowa, and he chose a punter, and I thought that was hilarious. The coach of the year was Kalen DeBoer. I think that is a no-brainer. Did you have any thoughts on that?
You can define that in a million different ways. I think there was a bunch of really good candidates, but I would probably go with Kalen DeBoer this year. I think Barry Odom's probably in the mix. You know who might also be in the mix, Ari? It's a young little whippersnapper down in Tuscaloosa. I don't know if people have heard of him. Nick Saban. He probably deserves some votes this year.
Well, let me ask you this, because I want to talk to you about this. I got some stuff on Twitter about this. Roster construction.
Half the job, if not more.
Right. So let me finish this then.
Yes.
Could you make the case that this could have been Nick Saban's worst coaching job?
Well,
coming into the year, like saving yourself from your poor roster construction. It's impressive that he's able to accomplish what he was able to accomplish given the roster limitations that we know existed or exist at Alabama. But I also have a hard time, because I have said this a lot on shows and people have gotten angry about it. It's like, if Nick Saban wins the national championship this year, it's the greatest coaching job he's ever had. It's like, why? Because he has the most talented roster in the country, mismanaged offensive skill position players and quarterback play, and then happened to win despite the mismanagement of the most crucial offensive pieces. Like, there's two ways of looking at it.
I think when people vote for these awards,
but there was one weird Auburn bounce away from not playing for a national championship. They could have, at certain times, it felt like they could lose to USF. Like, they had their moments, as you've listed on the show 9 times. he was like, that's a razor thin line between like,
and he
wow, the best coaching job I've ever seen to like, wow, that was a terrible coaching job.
Well, nobody ever, when it comes to these Coach of the Year awards, nobody ever factors in roster construction. It almost works against you. It's like, well, he had this.
You're so good at getting good players that
how
if
did
you
he
do
get
well,
that guy?
yeah.
He did his.
Well,
let me tell you what,
at the
his
conference
GM
level,
didn't get him to the draft.
That's where it's most prevalent at the conference level when you have like Big 12 Coach of the Year.
Wasn't
the
like
teams
Urban
that are built like
Big 10
I don't think Urban or Tressel ever won it, or they won it like once in a 20-year period. It's like that's what those awards are for. But the awards I think are supposedly for the coaches who accomplish stuff at programs we don't anticipate from. And I think that's part of the reason why Kalen DeBoer won at Washington, but also, honestly speaking, looking back at my Heisman vote, probably part of the reason why I had an affinity for Michael Penix.
Yeah.
Like, this is a guy who overachieved at a place that we didn't expect anything from, and the person that won underachieved as a team at a place that we expected the world from.
I always feel weird about the Coach of the Year awards in general because, for better or worse, it has devolved into, in almost all circumstances, a sorry we thought your team was going to suck award. And so that just is what it is. And I think for whatever it's worth with Kalen DeBoer, it's not that people thought they were going to suck, but I think a lot of people thought they're just going to go 10-2, 9-3 again. They don't have the defense. They'll break down. The Pac-12 is too deep. I think a lot of people thought that. So for them to be the first team in the history of the 12-team Pac-12 to get to undefeated, I mean, it's hard to find somebody more deserving and more impressive than what this Washington team did this year. So,
yeah. Okay, one more topic, and then we're going to get into voicemails. Deion Sanders landed some linemen in the portal.
4 of them.
Landed
quartet.
A 5-star offensive tackle, Jordan Seaton, out of Bradenton, Florida, IMG.
Yes.
That was the rabbit out of the hat late in the process pull in the high school ranks for Deion. So I guess you could count that as 5 additions to the team next year. What is your take? Is the offensive line fixed? Because we got a lot of, I don't know if you noticed this on Twitter, because I was at the zoo, but I check my mentions every now and then. What do you have to say about Deion now, asshole? Like we got a lot of that, and I don't.
Hey, I'm the one who wrote about it. I remember one who wrote talking to coaches across the Pac-12 who bemoaned his ability to get a whole new line. And here's what's left unsaid, because he did basically. I think he probably is going to start Kerry Walker from Connecticut. Tyler Seaton's going to start. There's no question.
You think so?
In my mind, yeah, yes. Huge position of need. I mean, as long as you don't.
You ever heard of a guy named Caden Proctor?
Yeah, and he starts, Ari. He started most of the season at the best program in the country.
Yeah.
So anyway,
the offensive line is not receiver. Let's just put it that way.
Sure, but have you watched Colorado, Ari? Tyler Johnson from Houston, Justin Mayers from UTEP, and Khalil Benson from Indiana. I think most of those guys are going to be starting, and they also add Tyler Brown from Jackson State, who was ineligible this year. So here's the question, and I think we'll find out, and I think it also does matter that you're not pulling like first team all conference guys. You're not pulling, guys that are, vaunted NFL prospects. Are you improved? I don't know. We'll see. But these guys are not world beaters necessarily. I think Tyler Johnson is probably the best of that bunch. He's got a lot of experience. He started at Texas.
It's not like Joe Alt is walking through the door.
Sure.
Like we're not getting like the best left tackle in the country. Now, the thing that I have a hard time with is I anticipate that their offensive line will be better. I think it'll be very interesting to see how ready a true freshman is to play a tackle position, if that's in case the plan.
Well, ready is an operative term when you have maybe one of the worst offensive lines in the Power
5-star offensive linemen can play terribly as freshmen and still turn out to be great. Like I think Caden Proctor could still be a first-round pick one day.
Yeah, I mean, when I covered Tennessee, they had Wanya Morris and Darnell Wright, who both had some rough moments as true freshmen. Started in Tennessee in the SEC going up against all those tackles. And Wanya, he's in the rotation with the Chiefs, and Darnell Wright's killing it for the Bears. So
right. I think that the development scale for linemen is just different. But the thing that I am really just trying to quantify here when it comes to Colorado, Dave, is what are the actual expectations? Everybody's like, we don't want to make the playoff next year. We anticipate making the playoff, or that's the expectation. but it's like he is building this program in a way where it feels like he's trying to hit the lottery in 1 or 2 years, and he's not building it in a way that has either staying power or is healthy to me. So even if these offensive linemen turn out to be very good, I don't know their collective eligibility situations.
I think it's a grab bag.
You're trying to fix it very quickly. And I hired a handyman in my house to fix some shit quickly. And let me tell you, it all broke again very quickly. So it's either doing it right or doing it fast. And I think he is doing it fast.
Well, here's part of this. We didn't get to see practice last year. Deion didn't allow a lot of that. I was out there quite a bit. But what we saw in games wasn't good. Now, I'm a big believer in continuity. I think you can learn from reps. I think you can learn from chemistry. And Deion is kind of doing, again, what he did last year, which is something that you don't see in college football, which is put all of this together and expect that it's going to work. And that, Deion famously said, I don't think, culture matters or chemistry matters. I forget. In the offensive line, it does matter. You need to know, communication is huge. Predictability is huge when this happens. This is what this guy does. Often the best offensive lines are offensive lines that have been together. And so if you believe that these guys are indeed upgrades, and we've seen a couple of Colorado's leftover offensive linemen, Van Wells is a center, Gerard Lichtenhan, I forget how to pronounce his last name. He was a 6'10 guy, played a tackle for them. Those guys both hit the portal. So if you believe that these guys are upgrades, there's something to be said for that. But if your plan is just, well, these offensive linemen aren't getting the job done, we're just going to hit the portal again next year. That's if there is a next year, that's
there's also a limitation of a ceiling too, of like, you're not going to get to level up. Like you're going to get to a point where that's as good as you're going to get. Like you're not going to get better every year. There's going to be an expiration or a limit to who is in there and who's willing to come play for you. And let me tell you, I could think of a lot of reasons why somebody might want to play for Deion Sanders. I can't think of one why an offensive lineman would. Other than playing early and trying to help build something quick, I would, that's a very important developmental place. And they know they hired a new offensive line coach, but that offensive line coach, I believe, has never been a position coach before.
He has not. Phil Lodo, I covered him as a player. That's when you're getting old, Ari. Yeah. I think two things with Colorado. And this is stuff that, didn't make it in the story that I talked to a lot of the coaches about. Two things that weren't in there that we had a lot of conversations about. One, which is, and Deion's doing it again, talking about the playoff, setting these really high goals, setting the narrative for his team. And that does, for better or worse, shape how people view your team, But that's also not really Deion's style. Last year I went out there for their team media day before the season, and they were saying, like, listen, we're not talking about 6-6. We're not talking about, improving, whatever. We're aiming for the playoff. They've got a playoff trophy that's on the wall, like a what's it called? A fathead, like hanging in their team lounge. Like it's very explicitly talked about. Okay. And a couple of the coaches I talked to were basically like this, he's building up this narrative that like gets people excited, but it like shapes how you like when you improve from 1 to 4 wins, even if you can nitpick, how much
you're still really so far off from that discussion.
Yeah. It shortchanges what you've actually done. And secondly, multiple of the coaches like, you can't be blaming these kids. You can't be blaming the kids when you're throwing the offensive linemen under the bus. It doesn't matter if they're doing the dumbest stuff possible, which I don't think they were. I don't think effort was an issue. I think they just weren't great players. And you just can't be like, we're going to get, new linemen. These guys can't cut it, especially when, and a lot of coaches notice this, especially when the quarterback, even when he makes some curious decisions, like in the Stanford game, where he threw a pretty backbreaking interception, when the quarterback can do no wrong. This is something that came up pretty frequently. And so, Deion's going to operate the program the way that Deion wants to. And and there's a question of, if you don't have all this big talk, are you as attractive for attention and recruits and bringing kids in? That's a fair question. But then when you do go from 1 win to 4 wins and you end the season the way that you do you undercut your accomplishments. I don't know.
Have you seen the movie American Beauty?
I have. It's a very good film.
I can't remember what Kevin Spacey's wife's name was. Carolyn in that movie.
Careful talking about Kevin Spacey, all right?
Yeah, no, I mean he's a person, and anything else you want to know about him, you can Google. But there was a scene where early in the movie where she's a real estate agent, and she is trying to sell a house, and she's saying to herself, "I will sell this house today. I will sell this house today. I will sell this house today." And she cleans it. She's on her knees scrubbing it, and it's a shithole. The house, right? Mm-hmm. Then they bring people in after she spends all morning cleaning the house. And she's using all these big words of the lagoon backyard and the kitchen and all the real estate terms to try to sell this home. But no matter what word she uses or how she describes it, anybody with eyes knows it's a shithole. Then after it's over and nobody buys it, they show her leaning up against the door as she locks it from inside, like crying against the door. You can see the scene if you've seen the movie. And that's what I always think about whenever I see Deion, like using these flashy words and we're going to get it done and we coming and Louis Vuitton luggage and we're going to win the national title. The playoff is an expectation. It's like, as the head coach of your program, your job is to be able to take real stock in what you have on your team, what it takes to win a national championship, where you stand up or stack up in your conference, and how far away you are and what the build should look like. And I feel like it's like faking it until you make it, but the substantive things that are needed in order to actually get to a place where you're a legitimate national championship contender are not being done. And those things are patience and continuity with the coaching staff, consistent and relentless effort in the high school recruiting space, talent retention, building up your players, not tearing them down, all the things that need to be done as a head coach in order to build that house into a sellable home. You can't fix with Windex and gloves and big words. You need a renovation. And I just do not see the renovation occurring from the outside. Now, he'll come out and tell you, hey, you're not in the house. You don't know what we're doing. Granted, I don't. All I know is Sean Lewis is the head coach at San Diego State. People are leaving your staff. The portal is filled with your players. You're bringing in some solid players, but not great players to replace them. And you're talking about the playoff next year. And it's just like, I'm not buying it again. Mm-hmm. After they started off 3-0, I bought it a little bit. I was like, okay.
I thought 7-8 wins.
Yeah, I mean, the way that they were playing, you would in the Pac-12, I was like, hey, they could do this. Mm-hmm. No shot, not even close. Mm-hmm. And I know that he had a much better year than the previous Colorado season. But going from 1 to 4, I think, is easier than going from 4 till 10 or 4 to 9. Like, I think going into a place where you're actually considered a tough out every single week and have a chance to win, and maybe their conference will be easier next year, and that'll change things. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Does what I'm saying make sense to you?
I mean, I think so, Ari. I think it's a question of, again, framing. They have no interest in framing progress. They're going to talk about titles. They're going to talk about the playoff, and that is their philosophy, and that's not going to change. And I think maybe part of it last year, there might have been some naivete there because Deion has won at everything, right? I mean, outside of prime prep, hadn't been a lot of like failures for Deion. And he's
not going to go beat Bobby Fischer in chess because he thinks he's.
But I think I think they thought they probably could, especially when they're 3-0, right? I think they maybe talked themselves into like, our thing works, and it doesn't matter that we're at a higher level with these like insane coaches that like eat, sleep, and breathe, and that's all they do, and they've been there for this long. I think they thought this is all going to work, and maybe it'll work eventually, but it was not going to work overnight. So.
You guys see what happens when we don't talk to each other in podcasts that much. We run a little long. Why don't we start with the voicemails here, Dave?
Yeah.
Hey, this is Chris. I grew up in South Carolina. I've never respected West Coast football, and I've never respected football north of the Carolinas. I went to the Oregon at Washington game in October, and I've never been to a louder environment. Now, I went there to appease a friend. He's a Washington alum. I had my doubts of the quality of football I was going to see. However, I was super impressed with the environment. And then, when the Pac-12 championship came along, Oregon's going to steamroll Washington. The environment can't go to Vegas with them. Well, I was completely wrong. what makes you think that Texas, with the 95th ranked pass defense in the country, even stands a chance against Washington? I would like to say thank you to Grace for the excellent coverage of Clemson. I read plenty of your articles while I was overseas and feeling a bit homesick. So thank you guys. Take it easy.
Get it, Grace.
Grace.
They
can outscore them. That's the short answer to that question.
Fall back on just the Ariisms.
Please do.
Texas is loaded, man.
Are you saying stars matter, Ari?
I mean, what makes me think they have a chance to win?
They have better players.
The same reason why I thought they would make the playoff before the year started. They've got a lot of really good players.
Where is Washington in 24/7 talent composite?
I think they're in the low 20s. Yeah.
Low 20s? Okay.
I mean, not bad. And obviously, Rome Odunze was a 4-star, and I think Jalen McMillan was a top 100 player. But they're getting more production out of Michael Penix than they would from his star rating. So, there are.
Well, he was like a low 4-star, wasn't he?
I think he was a low 4 or a high 3.
Low 4 or high 3 in that mix, like the top.
But when you get Heisman finalist production from a player like that, it skews the scales a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was at the game too. And let me tell you, that Pac-12 stadium was loud.
Really?
I mean, they did a really good job. I went to the Pac-12 stadium the year before, and I covered a few when I was in college. Not the championship game, obviously, because it didn't exist, but Pac-12 games on the road. And I've never been to Washington, unfortunately. That's one of my bucket list places now that I've been to a lot of places. But they had a big time conference environment. It was like, if you read Stuart Mandel's column, we were talking about, it's like, how is this coming to an end? But
I drove by Allegiant on the way. I've never been inside of there, but
yeah, it's a pretty stadium looking from the. I mean,
also, go ahead,
I just feel like everybody's just like, once you've been to Jerry World, it's just kind of like everyone's trying to make the new thing that's like that,
SoFi was pretty cool, I got to say.
Yeah.
Are we in the trust tree, Ari?
Yeah, I think so.
We're in, okay.
Yeah.
So for a long time, a lot of people have been saying, "Oh, Oregon, it's just as loud as, any of the SEC places. It's the loudest place in the country."
Oregon is not as loud as the SEC, no.
Yeah,
but granted, I went there when they were playing Arizona.
Yeah,
I think they scored like 70 points.
Listen, I love Autzen, great atmosphere, but this idea that seems to permeate. You've heard it, haven't you, Ari?
But that Autzen's the loudest stadium in the country.
Yeah, you've heard that idea.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But
don't they only have 70,000 in there?
Yeah, well, yeah, 70, 60 or 70. I don't know what the number
is.
It's
not big enough to
but it's but listen, you go to Kyle, you go to Neyland when it's rocking, you go to the Swamp, it's just another level. I'm sorry, guys. I loved it. It's a great atmosphere, but this idea is just not, that just doesn't hold water. I'm sorry.
Are we still in the tree?
I climbed down, but I think you're still up.
Okay, so all I've heard my entire life is that there's no way that you could ever match what the SEC does. And the loudest stadium that I've ever been in is at Penn State.
I've heard that.
So, and I've never been to Knoxville for a game, and I've never been to LSU, and I know that's the one. But I've been to Bama a few times for some pretty big games. It is not louder.
Bama, I would not put in the elite of loud. It can get up there. I think Kyle is the loudest.
I've actually heard that Auburn is really low key, really loud.
Auburn's smaller than you would think.
It's like
Auburn's okay. I hear people talk about Auburn.
You also have to understand, it also depends on who you cover and what the game it is. It's like you can be like, I went to Sanford Stadium with my Tennessee beat, and it just wasn't that loud. It's like, when I went to Penn State, they were playing Ohio State in a whiteout. So you have to take into account that if you're covering a team that's going to draw the best crowd noise or the most passionate crowds, then that can skew your perception a little bit, because going to Ohio State, Penn State on the road when they're both undefeated, or the Big Ten championships on the line for a whiteout at night, is not created equally as Alabama playing A&M. But Alabama played Texas this year, and I went for that one. And it was not nearly as loud as the whiteout. And the whiteout is also so visually imposing too. That's the other thing. It's like going into the stadium and everybody's wearing white and jumping and has their pom-poms or whatever. It is the loudest stadium I've ever been in. So I've got a whole career, hopefully, to still experience these places and see it. But I do think that the Big Ten has some. I mean, Madison.
I need to
gets
get
loud.
around to the Big Ten.
I think Ohio State, for the size it is, isn't loud enough. Now they have some big games, and they get loud in certain scenarios, but it's not that. I feel like Penn State is more imposing than Ohio Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I just think that Texas has a lot of really good players. They've got a very good defensive line, and yes, I think that Michael Penix is going to, find Odunze. He's going to find McMillan. They're going to make some plays. I think that, anybody should be afraid of Kalen DeBoer having a month to prepare offensively with the way that he and his offensive coordinator goes about doing his business. But the other thing too is, and I don't know that enough people give Sark enough credit, but he is a masterclass offensive play caller.
I'm so excited to cover this game. I think
it's going to be a banger.
Ball plays, yeah.
And when I covered the game in Vegas last week, I thought, well, this team has enough offensive pieces. Dylan Johnson, the running back, runs really, really hard. They've got a lot of dudes. Like Washington I feel like all four of these teams could win a national championship this year.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's not necessarily the case ever.
Most years.
So
yeah.
I like Texas in the game. I think that they are built more equipped to win the way that I've become accustomed to seeing these rosters built for the winners. Mm-hmm. But if a team that isn't in isn't in that recruiting group that's going to do it, I think Washington is perfectly built, and I think their defense actually, they just bottled up Oregon in the second half or in the first half. It's not like Texas's offense is that much better than Oregon's, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's just going to be a great game. So
I agree.
I don't think that anybody should come into the playoff and say, how does anybody else have a chance? Because I think this playoff is going to be the best one, hopefully, that we've gotten. So, yeah. All right, let's go to the next one.
Oh, we have a written submission.
Yeah, Zach B via The Athletic. Go ahead.
Who's going to be the most impactful coaching hire to their school from this cycle so far? This is from Zach B via The Athletic.
Did one just jump out to you? Because one just jumped out to me.
Yes. So I'll go with two. I'm going to say one is the best and one is the most impactful.
Okay.
DeAnton Lynn is going to have an impact at USC. Either we're going to figure out.
Oh, you're doing assistants?
That's who I thought we were. Yes. Either you are going to figure out that this Lincoln thing is really broken in a lot of different ways, or he should have fired Alex Grinch a long time ago. It can really only go one of two ways. I guess we can go any hire, Ari. I'll do assistants. And my best hire, James Franklin needed a jolt of ingenuity of some kind. And right now, college football is cyclical and people steal stuff all the time and schemes change and all these things change. The three hottest systems in the country right now are the Go-Go with Brennan Marion running out at UNLV. I think you're going to see a lot of people stealing stuff from that in the years to come. Jamie Chadwell's offense doesn't really have a name. It's basically like triple option, but with passing. And I think you're going to see a lot of people steal some stuff from that. We've already seen that. He has a lot of people come in when he was at Coastal and steal stuff. And Andy Kotelnicki and what they were doing at Buffalo and Whitewater, and obviously what they're doing at Kansas. Breaks apart from Lance Leipold, goes out from under the Leipold umbrella, goes to Penn State. It's a great hire. And they've got the personnel to do it. I think James Franklin is smart enough to be hands off here and just let Kotelnicki cook. And if you're Penn State, you're going to have a scheme that helps you make up for a talent deficiency. And that seems a lot like what Kansas has been doing while also improving their roster. So I love that hire. Ari, if you want to go head coaches, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a head coaching question, but mine, I just think was Elko. I know that. See, that reaction is what makes me like it.
Mm-hmm. That there's not a lot of pressure.
It's that they didn't overspend. They didn't hire somebody that has to answer the bell in the first quarter of the first game. They just went out and got a good football coach who has already proven that he can stabilize a program in a tough situation, who has coached from everywhere from the Ivy League to the MAC, now into the SEC and the ACC, who helped put them together their best recruiting class and what still stands as the best recruiting class in the country, who can just go in there and be a functional coach. With that talent and his ability to stabilize the insanity a little bit, I think will be a pretty important thing. If they would have gotten down their Texas A&M horse and gotten Dabo Sweeney or tried to overhire or like Ryan Day or one of these guys, and they just like brought somebody in that was going to make a splash, I just kind of feel like it is the same thing I felt about Nebraska with their latest, coach. Just a nice little wave, comfortable blanket of security and stableness at a place that's never been stable.
Two things on Elko. One, Colin Kleinheier is very good. I think Colin, I know him a little bit. He's been doing some unbelievable stuff at Kansas State, taking over there and using their quarterbacks really well. I thought they managed that situation with Will Howard and Avery Johnson really well this year. Colin's, young coach, and I think Mike, being a defensive head coach, will be pretty hands-off. Two, I think Mark Stoops is a better football coach overall. But what's really important and what Elko really has working for him, Ari? Do you smell a hint of dissension anywhere in Aggie land?
You mean from fans?
Yeah, from anybody. I don't. It seems like everybody's on board. Everybody's pulling in the right direction, in the same direction.
Well, I don't know how much of that is Elko
lot.
and how much of that is we didn't wind up with Mark Stoops.
No, it's Elko because it's a familiar name that helped fuel one of your best years and has gone on and had success elsewhere and does a lot of the things that check the boxes. Tough, hard-nosed defense, dynamic offense, overachieving, winning more than you're supposed to at Duke, and I think that excites a lot of people. He's got a lot to prove. You've got a tough situation at A&M because the expectations are so high and don't jive well with the history of the program.
But it isn't a circus. It's just not a circus.
It can be if you start losing. It can be if you start losing.
But I think that sometimes it's just a circus. And I just feel like there is a nice teaspoon or tablespoon of Dimetap going down the throat of just like security, functionality.
You're mixing your metaphors here. I don't know where cough syrup and circus is mixed.
No, I'm saying it's not a circus. It is a nice dose of sanity, which depending on how many people deflect from the roster, if they can come back and be in the top 10 of the 247 Sports Composite, if he does what he did at Duke and Wegman stays and takes a step forward, and I don't know if this is a preview of the offseason of me saying A&M is back, but
they got to fix some stuff. I mean, listen,
I like good coaches with good rosters stepping in and it not being overthought. Like they could have overthought this
a little bit, Ari, because they tried to keep Elijah Robinson, but losing him was huge. That's a big reason why they've lost so many guys to the portal on defense. He obviously had a lot of respect in that room with that group. So, you just got to go get some dudes. I mean, you're A&M. You'll be fine.
Yeah, and you're wearing A&M maroon. Okay, next question.
Lester L. Go ahead, Ari.
Okay, you do it. I'll let the.
You can have a question because I got a take on this, Ari, that you might need to sit down.
Okay, fine. I'll read the question. You give me the take that I need to sit down for. What would you do for the non-conference CFP bowl games in the future, or non-CFP bowl games? Sorry, because of the transfer portal, I think most teams will need to play their true freshmen for the bowl games. Some schools might still not have enough players. Do you think the NCAA should allow the potentially early high school enrollees to play in the bowl games?
Here's what we got to do, Ari. The bowls as currently constructed are not long for this world. People don't really see them as rewards as much as they used to. They're just sort of there. Opt-outs are a problem if you're not in the playoff, especially I think now that if you're not in the playoff, those bowl games are going to feel even more sort of worthless. You've got to think outside the box. And I think my plan has a lot of holes in it and some logistical things you got to fix.
You spit it out?
Move the bowls to the start of the season. Make them preseason exhibitions in week 0.
So they would still count towards your record,
They count
but
towards
they
your
would be celebrated in the same way, but people would be excited because the pageantry of it would be the beginning of the year.
Yes.
I've heard this before. I think that so I'm covering the Cotton Bowl. I know a lot about Ohio State, obviously, with my past there. I think covering that game is going to be great if like half their players don't play and you get to see the young players that are the future of the team. Like I know the Cotton Bowl is supposed to be I think that Mizzou probably wants to win it or cares about winning it more than Ohio State.
Big deal for
Mizzou.
Mizzou. Not a big deal for Ohio State.
Ohio State fans don't care about this game. Ohio State's players are going to opt out, and they're already on to repair mode after what happened against Michigan.
Is Devin Brown going to start, by the way?
If Devin Brown plays the majority of the snaps, or if Lincoln Kineholtz plays the majority of the snaps, or young freshmen or young players on the team come in and get to play some of those young wide receivers that we know so much about, that to me is like a spring game, but actually matters or is real reps against a team that is as good as Mizzou. I find that to be very compelling as well. Now that's not what they're designed to be. But if you have really good teams who have a lot of really good young players who don't feel satisfied by that as they're ending to their season, then it's far more compelling to me than watching Kyle McCord come back and play. By the way, if you've been living under a rock, Ohio State starting quarterback Kyle McCord is out into the portal, and so is receiver Julian Fleming, the former number 1 overall player in the state of Pennsylvania. Both are reportedly going to Nebraska, and that is what I meant about Matt Rule and his competence. That'll be interesting to see if he can pull that off. Maybe he will. But if you do it at the beginning of the year, it saves the sanctity of those bowls because, the Cotton Bowl, if the Cotton Bowl is just Texas versus LSU at the Cotton Bowl, and it's sponsored by the Cotton Bowl, everybody in the country would watch it. That said, how do you create the matchups? What happens to the postseason?
From the season before.
So what does it mean then? Does it mean that if you don't make the 12-team playoff, then your season just ends at the end of the year?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, you got to think that out. If that's your thing, then this means
I think ultimately that the second tier bowls outside of the G5 teams who get in and are very excited, that system, like the Citrus Bowls of the world, the Texas Bowls of the world, those games have never been less relevant and less valuable or less interesting. Interest is waning. It is going to further wane, dare I say flatline, in the era of the playoff when you've got playoff games happening while all these games are happening and they are turned into a sideshow in some ways. I don't know how to fix it. Yeah, but you can save it. They're not what they once were. You have to, if you're going to care about the bowls and want to preserve some level of a bowl.
I just think there's too many of them, Dave. I think there's two. I mean, everybody, like, the thing that's crazy about this is that people watch these games more than like regular NBA games, regular season NBA games. Like the ratings of like the Quick Lane Bowl, as Daniel Garrett just said, probably like people are gambling on it. We love college football. Like work is slow that month. Like people sit on their couches on Tuesday, December 22nd and watch Western Michigan play. And a MAC game. Like, I watch all the games. So from a rating standpoint, I think they're successful. But if you're trying to save fan buy-in to like actually care about them, then put them at the beginning of the year, I guess. But that just
sell those games out at the beginning of the year, man.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Imagine if Ohio State opened up the season next year on a neutral field against Mizzou. They go from a game that nobody cares about to a game that I think fans would be pretty excited about.
The only thing that's bizarre about that is that the players that got you there might not be there the next year.
Who cares?
But it does, yeah. I mean, no one cares about the game now. So the players who played, in the games this year aren't even going to be playing in it.
Exactly.
So, I guess I can get on board with that. And then you have the bowl trips and all the things, and like that's how people begin their season. I think I can get behind that.
This sort of parallels the journalism industry in some ways, Ari. in that the journalism industry largely, and by this I'm speaking mostly of newspapers. I came up in newspapers. I love newspapers, but too many of them just thought, well, we can cut and trim our way to profitability, forgetting the fact that you just make yourself a worse product. And the Bulls are becoming a worse and worse product. You have to think revolutionary. You have to do something big if you want to just not continue to be less and less and less relevant and less and less and less valuable. And that's where the Bulls are headed right now with the playoff. Because Ari, are you sitting down again?
Are we in the tree trust?
It's gonna expand again,
I
Ari.
know it's my move to whisper.
It's gonna expand again. I hate to break it to you.
With the playoff?
Yes.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah. So listen, be forward thinking. Get ahead of this because the playoff's going to expand again and it's going to get worse. And then you don't really have an event in some ways. And those games are going to be on campus and they're not going to be bowls. And we'll have to figure out a lot of questions. But do something different, Bulls.
I get tingly when you whisper. Okay, that was the last submission. Next week when we do this, we'll have more voicemails. It was just a Heisman weekend and all the things that kind of transpired with the portal and stuff. It just made it hard. But there's one last thing that we have to say. Yeah.
Go ahead.
In the influential coaching hire era or debate that we were just having, USC accepted or hired North Dakota State head coach Matt Entz as their linebacker coach. And this is a two-time national champion coach who is leaving North Dakota State in order to go coach the linebackers for USC, which I believe is a very impressive hire for Lincoln Riley. Hopefully it means that there's a more emphasis on tackling and that kind of spirit. Obviously North Dakota State, a lot of people probably don't end up watching their games because they're at the FCS level, but I think you could probably put it together that they are a pretty tough team that kind of embodies what that region of the country might, be known for. And I thought it was I thought it was a really good hire. So I would bundle him together with the defensive coordinator hire that he made from right across the city. And I think it's funny that one defensive coach that's coming in came from like 20 miles away. And then the other coach came from literally the most polar opposite place you can come from in terms of like geography. But, it does seem
Maine,
like
Lincoln, Maine's probably the opposite.
I don't mean it like based on a compass. I just mean based on like where you're from and what it's like there.
Lifestyle. Yeah.
You think that Hollywood and North Dakota, like I can't think of any.
Maine and LA are still pretty polar opposites in addition to being geographic opposites.
Yeah. There's more people in Maine, aren't there?
I got to tell you, I don't know. I've never been to Maine. I know
I've
you
been
can
to
get
Maine.
really cheap lobster.
I had a lobster roll in Newport. Well, that's in Rhode Island. What's the big city in Maine that's on the coast?
Augusta? I don't know.
No,
I don't know. My Maine geography is
Portland, Maine.
Yeah.
Had a lobster roll. I went on a snowboarding trip with some friends up there. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, so hopefully USC isn't just making the hires, but those hires are signs that things are going to be turned around and they're going to play harder, tackle better, and just be more functional. So
it's interesting. I got some hope.
Yeah. So, okay, guys, thank you so much for listening to the latest edition of Until Saturday. We will have full range of shows for you guys this week. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts and drop us a 5-star review. Leave a question. We'll try our best to answer it on the show. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find the Until Saturday feed anywhere you listen to your podcast, and then vice versa. If you're listening to this in podcast form, check the show's description to find us on YouTube, where we publish shorts and go live and all the things that you might not get. If you want to participate in future episodes of Sunday Sound Off, where we play more than one voicemail, the phone number is 316-462-9852. Again, that is 316-462-9852. And then lastly, be sure to subscribe to The Athletic for $19.99 for a year or $39.99 for 2 years by visiting theathletic.com/gift sale. We cover college football very extensively, but also every other sport too. For Dave Ubben, I'm Ari Wasserman. That was Until Saturday. Enjoy the bowl season, but we will be with you guys right by your side up until the college football playoff, the national championship game that I am attending. I think Dave might or may not. I don't know.
TBD. We'll see.
But I guess just bring back the turnover chain.
There you go, Ari. That's the spirit of conversion.